You're watching the October meeting of the Rhode Island Woodland Partnership. I'm David Gregg with the Rhode Island Natural History Survey, and today's meeting features Kyra Jacobs from EPA Region 1 talking about new initiatives to conserve forests and water in the Northeast region. The Rhode Island Natural History Survey presents videos to showcase the animals, plants, geology, and natural systems that surround us, and the people and organizations working to understand and conserve them.
So welcome to the October Rhode Island Woodland Partnership meeting. I'm Christopher Riley, co-coordinator of the partnership with Kate Sales. And this is our first Zoom meeting in some time since back in June. We've had some interesting field trips and retreats over the past few months, which we'll talk about today. But really glad to have Kyra Jacobs, the EPA's Region 1 Source Water Protection Program Coordinator, with us this afternoon. She's going to talk about the Mid-Atlantic or the Northeast Mid-Atlantic Forest and Water Partnership. But before we hand it over to Kyra, why don't we just go around with our typical round of introductions. As you know, I have the dual roles with the University of Rhode Island in Sweet Birch Consulting. And Kate, I'll hand it over to you.
Hello, Kate Sales, co-coordinator of the Woodland Partnership and director of the Rhode Island Land Trust Council. Scott, go ahead.
Hi, Scott Roran, Senior Director of Conservation at the Audubon Society of Rhode Island. David, I'll pass off to you.
I'm David Gregg. I'm the Executive Director of the Rhode Island Natural History Survey, which in Rhode Island is a nonprofit. We're not a government agency or a university program. Pass it to Nancy Stairs.
I'm Nancy Stairs. I am the Cooperative Forestry Program Supervisor with the Division of Forest Environment. Oh, I have to pass it on to somebody. Sorry. I'll pass it on to Alana.
Hey everyone, it's been a while since I've been to a meeting. Alana Russell. I am the URI Biocontrol Lab Manager and the Rhode Island Coordinator for the Forest Ecosystem Monitoring Cooperative. I will pass it to who's next on my screen, Kyra.
Kyra, do you want to go last and we launch you into the presentation?
Yeah, that would be great. Sorry, I'm just trying to pull out, my computer restarted right before, so I'm trying to go find the actual PowerPoint, not the PDF. So that'd be great if you give me a minute.
No worries. Let's see. But if you haven't introduced yourself yet, here's the opportunity to do so. Yes, Doug, I don't think that you had.
Hi, I'm Doug Still. I'm the principal.
Well, you're little garbled in your connection there, but say that we, know you, recently retired as the Providence City Forester and are now embarking on your consulting career. We'll come back to you, Doug. Hopefully you'll
And
have that
podcast.
Indeed.
Hi, Amanda Freitas. I'm the Rhode Island Wildlife Action Plan Community Liaison. So David introduced himself. I'm an employee of the survey under David, and I am a contract of the Rhode Island DEM Division of Fish and Wildlife.
My name is Rich Blodgett. I'm the work for Providence Water as the watershed manager.
Paul Dolan with the RC&D Council.
Hi everyone, I'm Alex. I'm a colleague of Kyra's at the EPA Region 1 office and also an alum of URI.
And a Rhode Island native.
Thank you, yes. I grew up in Tiverton.
I'm Kyle Lemoyne. I'm a natural resources planner with the Southern Conservation District.
Thanks. I think we have everyone there, right? It's a privilege to to have Kyra with us this afternoon. She's no stranger to Rhode Island and partnerships. A number of us have worked with her in different capacities, working on forested watersheds and drinking water source protection. Certainly during my time working with Rich out of the Situate Reservoir watershed lands and at the regional Kyra has been very active in the Regional Conservation Partnership Network. And Kyra, our meetings are usually quite informal. As people here, we work together in different capacities and wear different hats, and appreciate your bringing this to us. And you can have the the floor, and there's some opportunities for Q&A and discussion and afterwards, and can proceed as you like, really.
Oh, great. Thank you. Thanks so much, Christopher, and everyone, many of whom I do know. So it's great to see you all on Zoom. And I will just do a quick introduction. So I am the Source Water Protection Coordinator for EPA Region 1, and I am based in Boston, but I work in all 6 New England states. And it's hard to pronounce my name, so I'll say it again. It's Kyra Jacobs, and I've been at EPA for 25 years as of last month, and I'm lucky. I still love my job and feel really privileged to be able to do this important work, which is to protect drinking water supplies. And for me, I went to a school of forestry at Duke, but I wasn't a forester. I studied water resources, but I've always had this tremendous reverence for the work that forestry professionals do. And in 2011, I met Christopher at the New England Waterworks Association meeting in Worcester. There's this annual forum where water supply professionals come together to share information. And I'd never seen anybody do a presentation about deer management. So I went up to Christopher. This is the benefit of introducing yourself to speakers. And I was like, so excited to meet him. And he worked for Providence Water at the time with Rich. And so we ended up having this sidebar conversation and inviting some other folks to start collaborating to think about how watershed foresters could work together in New England. And it really led to some great partnerships. And as you know, you're part of the Regional Conservation Partnership Network, the RCP network. I'm in about 5 collaboratives that are part of the RCP network. I'm eternally grateful to Christopher for everyone he's introduced me to over the past 12 years. And that's how I, got introduced to the RCP network with Heisted. And I feel like maybe it's a New England thing, we're thrifty, we're Yankees, but I think we all rely on the opportunity to help each other and to build partnerships and to learn from each other, just like, our ancestors did, when they had to figure out how to raise food and clear the land and do all those things. So I'm just going to talk for about 15 minutes. And one of the things that Kate and Christopher and I were tossing around was, I just wanted to give you the backstory about an opportunity that we've been pursuing for a couple of years now, but it's really coming to fruition now in 2022. So I call it the Forest of Dreams. So some of you know Carl Honkinen. I believe he just told me earlier today when I was talking to him that he has funded some of the work of the Rhode Island Woodland Partnership through his role as the U.S. Forest Service State and Private Forestry Watershed Forester. So to frame this conversation, I am going to share my screen for a minute, just to, hold on a second, share my screen. I want to show you, I was reading your website, and Christopher and Kate had shared your website with me as a background. Can you see my screen yet?
Yes, we can see your screen. And so this is
your own history.
Rhode Island Woodland Partnership. We have a few pages on the larger Rhode Island Woods website, but it looks as if you've getting into our the origins of forestry in Rhode Island here, Kyra.
Yes. So it reminded me of all the presentations that Christopher used to do. So I just want to read you this paragraph in case you haven't seen it in a while. So the Rhode Island Forest Commission was formed in 1906 with Jesse B. Mowry appointed as its first commissioner. In 1907, Mowry penned the following in regard to Rhode Island's forests. It is a fact well known to most of you that the timber which once covered our hillsides, ameliorating our climate, beautifying the landscape, protecting the watersheds, and constituting one of the most valuable natural resources of the state, has now nearly all disappeared before the woodsman's axe. It follows, therefore, that the protection and rapid growth of the succession of sprout and seedlings is a problem of interest and importance to the people. So I just thought, how apropos, I'm going to stop sharing, how apropos that, you know, someone wrote that 115 years ago. And I love that it's on your website, because I always say, for those of you that are old enough to remember that movie Back to the Future, in the presentations that I've done about the work that New England water suppliers are trying to do to protect their watersheds, you know, it feels like Back to the Future, that we're like turning back a century to when the Weeks Act was created that founded the US Forest Service, or created it. In case you don't know, the Forest Service was created because Congressman John Weeks had grown up in northern New Hampshire and saw, very similar to what your first forestry commissioner in Rhode Island saw, that the landscape had become denuded and just had affected tourism and the economic industry of not just northern New Hampshire, where he was from, Lancaster, New Hampshire, but it had affected the Merrimack River, which was the heart and the engine of the Industrial Revolution. So he tried for I think 9 years to get the Forest Service created, and Speaker Cannon in Congress at the turn of the century kept saying, we will not spend one red cent for scenery. So ultimately, he was able to get the Weeks Act passed, which created the Forest Service because of the commerce impacts. So we find ourselves in that situation again, especially in New England, where a lot of people are attracted to our states because of the beauty of the landscape and because forests drive the economic engine of our state. So both the tourism and the well-managed forests creating, you know, forested and wood products. So I just wanted to tell you why I was going to talk to you today, which is this Forest of Dreams idea that Carl Hunkin and I had. Was we had seen in the past 8 years that there's this great partnership called the Southeastern Partnership for Forest and Water, and they've been doing some really great things at the state level, but under the umbrella of this partnership. And in case you don't know, the Forest Service regions are very complicated. So Forest Service Region 9 is the Northeast region, and it stretches from Maine to West Virginia all the way to Wisconsin, and their headquarters are now in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So Carl Honkinen sits at the University of New Hampshire, Durham, but he reports to Milwaukee. And then Forest Service Region 8 stretches from Texas to Virginia. So the Texas to Virginia folks decided to launch the Southeastern Partnership for Forest and Water when some folks were talking at one of the meetings they had. And so South Carolina took the lead. And over the course of the past 8 years, we've been watching with much jealousy and admiration for the work that they're doing. So I'm going to just quickly walk you through the PowerPoint that I shared. I apologize, it was only two hours in advance that I sent it to Kate and Christopher, but we decided to have a virtual meeting to explore the idea of doing this in New England. At first it was going to be the Northeast. So we were thinking New York to Maine. But then the Mid-Atlantic people said, no, we want to do it too. And we're part of the Forest Service Region 9. So, you know, just like the Field of Dreams movie, if you build it, they will come. If you build a baseball diamond in the middle of a cornfield, people will come. So we decided to just go for it. So we held this virtual meeting. We invited staff from state forestry agencies, NRCS, EPA, and state drinking water programs. And we didn't invite conservation districts. We just invited one person, Annika McGurk, who is the regional rep based in Maine. And then Rural Water Association, because they had been a really important part of this partnership in the Southeast. For those who don't know, Rhode Island is represented by the Atlantic States Rural Water Association, which includes Connecticut and Rhode Island. And they're funded by EPA and the Farm Service Agency. So now I'm going to show you this. We did get a lot of interest in developing this partnership, and we had a really quick turnaround because the virtual event was held with about 80 people with the states from Maine to West Virginia on June 22nd. And we knew that just a show of hands or nod if you have your camera on, I think most of you are probably familiar with the Forest Service Landscape Scale Restoration Grant Program. As I mentioned before, Carl said it helps fund the Rhode Island Woodland Partnership. So we were trying to think about how to get someone to be an anchor partner to apply for an LSR grant on a very large scale, a regional scale, to help us create and establish formally the Northeastern Mid-Atlantic Partnership for Forests and Water. Sort of a long name, but we had to be inclusive. So I'm just going to quickly show you what the Southeastern folks shared with us at that event, so you can get a sense of what we're trying to achieve. It won't be the same, but there'll be a lot of similarities. So just in your head, think about Rhode Island could be a piece of this. What we want to do is fund on the ground projects for forestry, accelerate the amount of funding that comes into our states that are in this partnership, and to have a coordinator that we hire to run this. Because as we all know, if you don't have someone running an initiative, a collaborative, I've learned this firsthand, it just doesn't get done, or it might get done sporadically or in hiccups, but, I get pulled off on regulatory projects. So, it's just, it's challenging. Okay, so share my screen. Okay, go over to my PowerPoint. So there was a woman named Kitty Weissman who was the coordinator for this. Sorry, bear with me a second. Where did my PowerPoint go? Close your eyes. I'm going to embarrassingly show you my screen. Where did my PowerPoint go? This is a mistake we make when we try to do multiple things. Where's my, oh, it should be over here. Sorry, I can't see things. Bear with me. Okay. All right. Slideshow. All right. So this is the Southeastern Partnership for Forests and Water. This is not my presentation. This was our colleague from, hold on, I minimize. Our colleague from the Southeastern Partnership, Kathy Hawes, presented it. And feel free to interrupt me. I can't see you guys right now. So Christopher, if there are any questions, I'm just going to briefly run through this for about, 10 minutes at the most. So we all know healthy forests equal clean water. We all know the benefits. And there's been a lot of effort to try to come up with specific metrics for how to measure this, but it's really hard. So we think that the best way to bring people together to do this work, like Rich and others that work at water utilities full time, we know that there's a benefit to protecting the source by having it surrounded by undeveloped land or well-managed timber forests. So this is pretty basic. We wanted to ensure healthy southeastern forested watersheds for them. For us, it'll be Northeast Mid-Atlantic. So what they did was they did these state-by-state forums. So they had like 4 or 5 states that were really engaged in this work, like Texas, Arkansas, and a few others. And they held 16 forest and water forums in 8 states, as you can see: Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, North and South Carolina, Tennessee, and Texas, with thousands of participants. And they did these in person. And what they didn't try to do was host, a massive regional event with 8 to 10 states, because they felt like, and we agree that these are really state specific issues, but we can benefit from working and learning from each other. And in the case of like Rhode Island, you already have a great partnership. So maybe we could think about how could we use Rhode Island's needs to match the need that Forest Service has to fund on the ground projects, because that has to be a part of these landscape scale restoration grants. So you can see how broad this is. It's federal, state, tribal, industry, professional, academic, non-government organizations, and corporations. I should pause for a second and tell you, we do have an anchor partner who is applying for this grant. I was able to convince the National Association of Conservation Districts. So they are applying for a grant for all the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic states and Ohio. They decided to join in as well. So it's 13 states total. And the original application, the first round of the application has been submitted. It was due September 29th. And the final application is due to the Forest Service portal by November 10th. So we are in the throes of this right now. So this is sort of live. So you can see what they did in the Southeast, and we obviously have similar partners in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic. So you can see here, this is the goal, and they've had 8 years to do this. So they're in a different phase than we are, but identify the champions, design, look at which are the priority forests and watersheds. For us, it's based on drinking water specifically, which ones are benefiting the drinking water supplies in New England. We have 10,000 drinking water supplies in New England, and we have about 300 surface water supplies. So it's a little more manageable, large surface water utilities. And then how to structure the collaboration. This is where we would need a coordinator to be hired if we were successful with this grant application. And as I said, Forest Service really wants these projects, these specific projects that can be scaled, and document and measure the outcomes, and then sort of, rinse and repeat, go back and keep doing this work to find the funding. We never have a shortage of projects, good projects to be funded. And part of it's land conservation as well. So their champions, their partners was Texas Forest Service. So it's sort of like Christopher being the host or the partner at the University of Rhode Island. They have this terrific guy named Hugh Simpson, who was one of the original architects of this Southeastern Partnership. He's based at Texas A&M with the Forest Service. And then Arkansas, their Department of Ag Forestry Division, and then South Carolina, the Rural Water Association. The best way to think of a Rural Water Association is they're like what a conservation district is to NRCS. So it's a nonprofit, non-government entity. So again, this is not anything you don't know. Forests and landowners, how to help keep the forest cover in the watershed, well-managed forests, and to help protect the water quality. But they need money, and we needed a strategy. They need a strategy, we need a strategy. And this, you may recognize the green and the blue and the yellow. This is from the, they based it off of the US Forest Service has a great tool called it's a GIS-based platform called Forest to Faucets, and they've recently launched Forest to Faucet 2.0, so F2. So this is a GIS map. This I just read recently this morning. The Savannah River Clean Water Fund has a great model similar to what you have in Rhode Island, where you have, I always forget, Christopher, if it's penny per 100 or penny per 1,000 that helps fund source water protection, drinking water protection in Rhode Island. And penny per 1,000 gallons, I think. And I can't see you, so tell me if I'm wrong. So they developed their GIS maps. So the purpose of the GIS maps are to prioritize which land parcels need to be protected. And the Savannah River folks created a similar watershed fund to help fund land conservation and priority drinking water areas. They use more rivers in the Southeast than we do in New England because they're hard to protect. So they looked at family forest landowners. As we know, forested landowners are aging and there's more pressure to sell. So this was their model. How to target the family forest landowners. What are they using their land for? What are their concerns? And to tailor solutions. So we would love to do something similar to this in the Northeast Mid-Atlantic Partnership and think about tax incentives. And then they looked at funding sources, Farm Bill. As you know, that can be challenging using the USDA NRCS money. And it's a lot of money, but it can be challenging to implement. And then here we have EPA's money. In case you don't know, DWSRF, that's a drinking water state revolving funds. Those are set asides that go to our drinking water programs. There's a certain percent that goes to state drinking water programs, and then more innovative approaches. And when you C, state revolving fund. It used to be gray infrastructure like pipes and distribution for water utilities like Providence Water or Newport Water, other, any water utility. But now we're really looking at natural infrastructure, and that could be funded possibly with the new bipartisan infrastructure law to make it, there's gonna be so much money coming. We want to use some of it for natural infrastructure. So again, these are just all the partners that you are familiar with. Rhode Island's already doing it. You're way ahead of the game with the source water protection fee statewide. You have the land trust engaged, paper company, not so much in Rhode Island. You don't have the big Weyerhaeuser and other paper companies, but in the Southeast, that's important. Obviously NRCS, your forestry folks, associations, ag extension. So we know who the partners are. And a lot of communication. This was such a great graphic they have. Clean water grows on these trees. It's a terrific infographic. So I'm going to stop sharing. But before I stop sharing, is there any slide you want me to go back to or show you? Okay. All right. Anyone raising their hand yet? Christopher.
Thanks, Kara. But that was wonderful, overview, of the project and, what you hope to accomplish, how it evolved and looking at the Southeastern partnership as a model. Certainly that was informative for me. So we can open it up to, Q&A and discussion now, and you can, raise a hand in turn or, put something in the chat. But I'll just sort of start off with one question, Kyra, and this is clearly, it's a complex, partnership that involves some, big players, the federal, state and local level. And how does this sort of move from the sort of large conceptual scale to, actions on the ground without getting too complicated?
Yeah, so we have to wait and see if we get the funding. That's number one. And as you know, well, some of you know, you submit the final application in November. I'm obviously a federal employee, so I'm not submitting the application. The National Association of Conservation Districts is their national office. And they were here last week. They were doing some meetings with folks. For example, we've been meeting with the New England Forestry Foundation, or they've met with them, and they met with NRCS, they met with the Forest Service, and they, meaning Annika McGurk, is, as I mentioned, the Northeast Regional Rep for the National Association of Conservation Districts, and she's also the National Forestry Contact for the National Association of Conservation Districts. Her predecessor was a guy named Mike Beacom. Some of you may know his name. So Annika and her partner colleague from NACD headquarters is Jennifer Nelligan, and she happens to be from Lowell, Massachusetts, so she understands a little bit about our geography, and she's based in DC. She's NACD's Chief Program Officer. So together they've led the charge. They had the very challenging task in September. They had 1 month to get letters of support from 13 state foresters to proceed. One thing, and they did it, but we had great luck. The good thing is the Forest Service is allowed to help us as we go through this process. The only thing they can't do is, actually help write the proposal, but they're encouraged to collaborate with us. So they made introductions to some of the state foresters for us. We had meetings. I think I participated and helped plan, easily 20 meetings with different partners, but we were lucky. All the state foresters were meeting across the country. All the state foresters were together in mid-September at their National Association of State Forestry meeting. And so they were, apprised of this. There's an association I was not aware of, the Northeast Midwest Association of State Foresters. I don't know if I got it right, but his name's Ian McFarland. So he is the executive director. So he's been helping us. So all the state foresters are on board, including yours. And we're just really excited. So to answer your question, Christopher, we'll see what happens with the funding. But the good thing is that I have funding from EPA headquarters to at least do an in-person follow-up meeting to the June 2022 virtual. So I'm open to suggestions. We're going to have a planning committee. It's going to have to be somewhere between Maine and West Virginia because that's our geography. So I don't know, maybe it'll be New York, New Jersey. I'm not sure yet, but EPA headquarters has provided me with a contractor. Some of you may recall it was about, I don't know, 8 years ago, we did one of these workshops in Rhode Island with Lorraine Joubert, focused on source water protection. And we used to rotate around the region, but obviously we hadn't done much in person, but we're ready to go back to in person this coming year, 2023. So it's a long way of saying that that's the interim step. You know, hopefully next spring, early summer, we'll do this in-person meeting, and we'll be able to keep the discussion going and have salient, you know, discussions around technical issues. And Christopher and I were involved, for example, in hosting the folks from Michigan who helped us put on climate adaptation for Northeast forests. What is NIAC, Northeast Institute for Applied Climate Science, the folks in Michigan. So like that was a 1 day in person in Massachusetts, and we had a field trip. And so I would love to do a field trip associated with this upcoming one. But in the short term, the model would be, Christopher, if we get the funding, then we would hire the NACD would hire a coordinator. I say we because I'm still part of this because we dreamed this up, Carl and I, but we, the NACD would hire a coordinator, and then we would continue to ask states, do you have on the ground projects that you can, that you need funding for? And then we will try to, the coordinator will apply for funding, additional funding. So we'll just keep organically growing the partnership like the Southeastern Partnership has done. And they've been mentoring us and helping us. So the folks from, you know, South Carolina, Texas, they're all helping us figure out how to do this work. So we're just copying them, and they're letting us, because, you know, we all win, you know, rising tide lifts all boats. So we're just really excited to think about right now, the 2 states that are interested, and this is where Rhode Island could come in to the conversation. The 2 states that raised their hands and said they wanted to do state-specific projects in this grant proposal are Ohio and Connecticut. So one of the things we talked about with Connecticut was there's some watersheds on the eastern side, and obviously Christopher is really involved in the Southern New England Heritage Forest work, the RCPP. Are there watersheds? And I know there are because I also the sole source aquifer coordinator for the region. So the watersheds that straddle Western Rhode Island and Eastern Connecticut, could we think about how to protect your watersheds and Connecticut's at the same time? And insect, all the issues that you're seeing with help me with the term infestation.
Spongy moth?
Yes. Yeah, I don't know which one specifically, but I know like they keep moving towards you from the, mid-Atlantic up, even gypsy moth, all the things that are in my yard, it's hemlock woody adelgid, so whatever it is, could we work together with Connecticut and get a project funded, that would benefit Rhode Island forests as well. So I don't know if that helps at all, Christopher. We don't know the answers yet because we haven't gotten funding, but.
Yeah, that's helpful. And so it seemed that in the Southeast, there are a lot of different components of the project or potentially, but there's land conservation, there's on the ground management and practices, and then just the funding to coordinate it all and organize meetings and workshops and educational events and so forth. And would this project fund all of those kinds of activities, or would it focus on certain types of activities?
It's our forest of dreams, so we can have it we can create whatever we want, because this will be ours. It will be the Northeast Mid-Atlantic states. And in the Southeastern states, they said about half their states actually are participating actively, and half of them just don't have the bandwidth. They have the interest, but not the resources. So Rhode Island raises their hand and says, we want to be an active part of this. We want one of the first workshops to be held in our state. Then we'll make that happen. So I think that would be really exciting. So I would love to see Rhode Island, you know, take your Rhode Island Woodland partnership and say, we know how to do this. We've been doing it for years. We have projects we want to fund. And so you tell us, that's what we're looking for, your input. And maybe not today, you know, October 20th, but maybe by March when we know if we get the funding. And I would love to see, you know, maybe I would have you guys participate in an in-person forum if that was a possibility, to talk about all the terrific work you've done. And, you know, I don't know if Rich is willing to come off mute, but I feel like one of the things that has really been so important for the Southeastern Partnership is they've had some really strong partnerships with like Central Arkansas Water. So they've had these anchor water utilities that have stepped up, and or the Savannah River folks that created a water fund to fund source water protection work. So and you know, the fact that I know Providence Water has worked really closely with the conservation districts. Personally, I would love to see more work with Newport, because Newport has a lot of challenges with the reservoirs. So I'm not sure how many of those reservoirs are forested or impacted by forestry, but it's all connected in certainly land conservation in the Newport watershed, the 9 reservoirs would be critical.
So Kara, do I understand that you did not have to specify just how much you were going to spend on the ground practices or easements or workshops, for example, that there's room to flesh this out? Which would be big different from, you know, say the Oak Resiliency LSR grant that we worked on, but this sounds like a project at a whole different scale.
All right, I'm in the office, so I was trying to be on mute. So I'm trying, if you want, I'll show you the proposal. I'd be happy to show you guys. I can't send it to you, but I can show it to you. But yes, their budget, their line item is all fleshed out. I think it's 600,000. They're going for the maximum. And the, I think it's less than 200,000 for the on the ground projects. And as you know, things are expensive, so it's not land conservation. So if you fill the time for me for the next 30 seconds, I can just show it to you. Would that be helpful? I just can't send it because it's proprietary.
Sure, you're welcome to share your screen.
Okay. Yeah, and Rich, if you want to come off mute, I would love to hear the perspective of utility.
Sure. Sounds like a great program. Something we should, you know, I would personally support partnering with Connecticut. I would certainly support helping these other water suppliers in Rhode Island, and not exactly sure how to go about doing that. And Newport's in a tough situation with their land use over there. But yeah, we're very open to new ideas, new approaches to implement here, sharing what we've done so far, possibly putting out on the table where we may want to go in the future.
Jamestown's more in a bind on water than Newport, and their watershed is forested.
All right, can you hear me now? Sorry. Yeah, Jamestown is a sole source aquifer, so I'm quite familiar with Jamestown because I get the project reviews. I have to write those letters. Okay, can you see my screen?
We can see your screen.
Okay, so here's the letter that was sent to all the state foresters thanking them for their support. Let's see, letter of commitment, narrative. I'll just show you the narrative first. So as I said, it's really short. interagency multi-partner collaboration to advance science-based restoration of priority forest landscapes, protect water in 13 states from West Virginia to Maine, regional collaboration, all the things I just told you about. Oh, and of course, these were all priorities in the state forest action plans. So I won't read this all to you, but I guess highlight some of these things. Promote science and research, impacting forest management, water quality and quantity, apply the latest science and technology, coordinate communication strategies. So NACD would provide a dedicated coordinator to support the partnership. And then I'm happy to show you the budget worksheet too. As I said, the first sponsored projects would be Ohio and Connecticut, but we really want to move into other states quickly. You know, it's a 3-year project. And I think Rhode Island is so well positioned. The reason I was late for this is because we're in the middle of a workshop that went to 1:15. Connecticut is presenting their they did a mapping tool showing land use juxtaposed with the state drinking water supplies. So, you know, it just goes through the reasons to support this, acres, outreach to communities, all the things you just said, Christopher, you know, why, how to prove, and this will be public, I think, once it's submitted. All right, so total of $1 million in match would be provided in kind and cash. NACD will provide X time. And then the Ohio Division of Forestry was going to provide 175,000 match. And I think Connecticut, yeah, Council on Soil and Water Conservation, 175,000. So, you know, I'll wrap up, Christopher, because I know that we have a lot. As I said, I'm providing funding for an in-person meeting. So yeah, so really focus on underserved communities as well, and using EPA's environmental justice mapping tool, which if you haven't seen that, is really important. And okay, I'm just quickly, Christopher, just going to show you the budget worksheet and then we will jump. I know you have other things to cover. But to answer your question.
Yeah. So Kara, my understanding, what you're showing us is that it's sort of mostly you're focused on the new approaches and
replicating the Southeastern Partnership.
Yeah, and the practices, but not the, say, conservation easements themselves, which of course
right,
would be very expensive.
Because it's not enough money, right? Yeah. Okay, so we want to have a coordinator. Then you've got fringe. Okay, so I'm just looking for the yeah, and again, they have to flush it out more. I don't know if this is helpful, but I haven't looked at this in a while.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. I mean, it'll all be public eventually. So yeah, these are the on the ground projects. Okay, so it'd be passed through to the state forestry agencies, or in Connecticut, I think it's really the districts would be doing the work. The Connecticut Council on Soil Water Conservation would implement projects from the Connecticut State Forest Action Plan. So 175 for each state. So that's why I wanted to talk to you today, because in the future, if we get funding, I would love to see Rhode Island come in with some of those, because we're going to look for states. And you know, I think it'll be who's a good fit with the conservation districts. And Rhode Island's a perfect fit because you've been doing this together forever. So yeah, so that's my summary. I hope it's helpful. Forest of Dreams.
Well, we really appreciate the, you know, having the awareness that this proposal is in, so we could, you know, think about what we might like to do if it came through. If anyone else has, you know, questions or thoughts for Kyra, this is the time to chime in. All right. Well, thanks so much, Kyra. Again, appreciate it so much. And
I'm going to listen in if that's okay. And
yeah, I was just going to say, welcome to continue to participate in the meeting, but understand that you have a lot going on, and you know, can head out when you need to do so.
Yeah, it's okay. I'm going to listen in because I want to learn more from all of you. And I'll just put in a plug that for those of you who don't know, the Northeast Association of Conservation Districts holds an annual in-person meeting every August, and this coming year it will be hosted by Maine. So it's a great way to gosh, I can't remember. I think you guys hosted in like 2014, the state of Rhode Island, but I'm assuming there'll be a lot of emphasis on forestry. So I'll be sure to keep, Christopher and Kate in the loop. And for anybody who's interested, I think I'd like to invite forestry professionals to our in-person event, that I will be doing sometime next spring, summer, that I described to you. So stay tuned, and at a minimum, I will connect Christopher and Kate with Annika, because once I get through this proposal November 10th, I think they'll have a little more bandwidth to talk offline about, how we can all work together, Rhode Island and the districts, and, until we find out about the funding, which won't be until March when Forest Service gets their budget. Thanks, and I'll
Thank you.
off my video. Okay, thanks, Kate. Yeah, it's through all the hard work you guys have always done to teach me about what you're doing. So thank you.
Great. So the second item on our agenda is just a review of the strategic plan session that we had during the retreat, Prudence Island last month. Had a really good day out there. Thanks so much to John Mitchell of the Narragansett Bay Research Reserve. Working particularly with Kate on coordinating that. Know that it was a big commitment for the whole day out there. We had to reschedule once, but we got a wonderful tour of the reserve, and Sean Williams of the Prudence Island Conservancy also participated in the full day, and we got a lot to learn from her. And so I think I'm just going to walk through the notes, the content that we generated at during our session there. And then Kate, if you or any of the rest of you were out there would like to share some thoughts, and then can open it up to others. So now time to share my own screen. Here we go. Trust that everybody can see that. So we had a small sort of dedicated group of folks out there. I'd say it's not sort of a subset of the Woodland partnership, not really representative of all the partnership certainly, but including some core members who've participated for a long time. Some folks who are newer to the partnership, but have become quite involved, and then sort of having some perspectives like that of Sean, who hadn't participated in a Woodland Partnership meeting before. It's quite valuable. And so really a range of different organizations, from government to conservation organizations to consultants. Asked everyone to look over our 2017 to 21 plan in advance. As the education focal area ended up being less of a priority than the policy and economics and stewardship areas. But we want to note that as individual organizations, a lot of members have been working on the education part in different ways. And then the policy and economics part of the plan really became a big part of our activity and took off in ways that none of us had quite anticipated. So we just moving into the sections here. One thing that we discussed was the relationship of the Woodland Partnership to the Forest Conservation Commission. Of course, number of partners were quite involved with working on that effort, but it's thought that we want to be distinct from the Forest Conservation Commission, so we can provide feedback and input, but our role is not to be an advocacy group. In Rhode Island, we do pretty well working at statewide issues, and the partnerships for best places working at that level, rather than municipal issues. number of people, chimed in, that we could do a better job of integrating, urban forestry and, related environmental topics into what we do. Having, urban foresters and allied professionals, regularly, participating in our meetings. There's potentially a larger role there. We, thinking of this, anticipated, infusion of federal funding that's coming through the Inflation Reduction Act, and this we want to be able to get organized to be able to access some of that, and could this be a way to finally help fund that part-time coordinator position that we've talked a lot for a long time but never done, and that both Kate and I remain really interested in the partnership as our professional roles have changed. There's just a limited amount of time that we can devote to it with the other things on our plate at the present time. It was thought that a conservation district, the natural history survey, maybe even an Audubon could be involved with posting the coordinator, and really like to have the Nature Conservancy actively participating, since they're such an important conservation organization, not to mention a big landowner in Rhode Island, and thinking about collaboration with the Rhode Island Environmental Education Association. We had during this meeting, there's quite a bit of talk about messaging and communication. Some of those other people were in the meeting now, like you, Amanda. I know you had quite a bit to share on this topic at one of our summer meetings, and an email leading up to it. But I think there's a limited number of course people who are aware of the partnership now and what we do, and how we can broaden our participation in to get out to a wider audience with the limited resources that we have. Thinking of what we want to work with, how we can make greater use of channels like the Rhode Island's Woods website, the podcast that the Doug's still starting up, but a lot to think about here. What we want to, we all agree that we want to avoid direct advocacy. That's not in our wheelhouse. People generally found comfortable with the existing plan structure. Was thinking that we're going to try to integrate messaging and communication into all the parts of the plan. Let go of that current education section and sort of focus on the policy and economics and stewardship sections. And Sean spoke to the need to have some kind of public facing summary of the plan, or sort of a one pager, so that people know what the Woodland partnership is about. We brainstormed on some of these focal areas in stewardship. Talked about following up on the oak resiliency grant work. That grant has just concluded, but of course there's more work to do there. We didn't really have ultimately the opportunity to focus on some of the deer and regeneration issues that we originally wanted to, but we could try to do more work on that. We want to continue with the implementation of the Forestry for Rhode Island's birds, with all the work that Kate and colleagues have done in developing the guidelines and in the workshops. Seeing that that's carried out on the ground. A lot of work going on climate smart forest management as well, and that'll carry forward. And we thought that we needed some kind of priority item relating to urban forestry, and we weren't quite sure just what that should be, but perhaps some of those of you who are working in that sphere can help us define that. And just moving on to the policy and economics, certainly we've been partners have been involved with the identifying the best practices for combining forestry and renewable energy, continuing on that front. Been some movement on, trying to improve the climate for forest-related businesses, and then, working on estate and legacy planning as well was a topic that came up. Seems that the mix of virtual and Zoom or virtual and in-person meetings has been pretty popular. Maybe having a couple of virtual meetings that allow us to gather from different places around the state, for every field trip that we do have. But people like having the opportunity to get together, really be out there in person. Of course, that's why so many of us were drawn to doing this kind of work in the first place. And even if it may be some smaller groups that get together for some of these field trips, it's still worth doing. So we sent these notes around in November. Kate and I are going to try to do a short survey of Woodland Partnership members to get input on what they think the priorities should be. How we should refine this list, and also to try to get organizations and individuals to sign up for championing and moving some of these priorities along. I want to flesh out more details on the stewardship and policy and economics focal topics, and then we're just going to basically work with the existing template to redo the plan. I think for a shorter period of about 3 years going forward. So I'm going to stop there. And Kate, is there anything that you would like to add to or comment to that?
No, thanks so much for giving us the full overview, Christopher. I would add that if you have the opportunity to go to Prudence Island, to do it. It's very cool.
See one thumbs up out there. Any reactions to that, or we'll continue on? Certainly, know that some of you, wanted to be out there, but there will be, opportunities to participate in field trips to come. And if any of you think we're, really missing important focal areas, or headed off in the wrong direction, please let us know. We're going to work on this survey just to try to keep the feedback manageable, and then hopefully move ahead with and conclude the process within a few months.
I'll just jump in and say we were thinking about a survey in sort of like a Google form so that we can collect your responses on our thoughts on the strategic plan in one centrally located area, in the different categories or areas where Christopher just presented, pretty much, with also the opportunity to attach comments at the end. We have that capability to attach files. So it may just be a good centrally located place to receive feedback.
Yeah, go ahead, Amanda.
This is a perennial problem of mine, as David will attest to. Can somebody give me a definition of what you were considering advocacy? Are you just saying we don't want to go up on the hill and be advocating positions, or does that factor into messaging? And I'm not sure how far that goes.
Yes, I think, specifically so far as, it gets into, where advocacy, edges into lobbying, that's an area that we need to stay away from, because, now there's the, have the commission and, some of us who are members of the partnership. It's not something that everybody can work on.
That's
And
exactly
also
the answer I was hoping for.
Yeah, so we have 2 position papers where we've taken a position on climate change, we've taken a position on fragmentation, and that's an informed forest-based science. It's an information position, not a like, let's take this and comment on behalf of the Woodland Partnership mission. So straying away from that.
I think it's important not to take the wind out of the sails of our individual organizations, you know, and muddy kind of the message. And I think, you know, some organizations are really set up to do a lot of advocacy, and you know, there's certainly some things that we can do, but we don't want to take the wind out of the sails of the other organizations. That's the way I think about it. I had another question, and maybe it's more of a thought or a subject of future discussion, but and this applies both to Kyra's presentation of the work that she's doing, as well as the strategic plan. So these sound like great plans and grant proposals, but I'm as I listen to them, I'm trying to convert them into actions on the ground, or like I'm trying to imagine a parcel where I would go and do a thing. And you know, partly that's, and I'm having trouble. I'm having trouble imagining the priority in Rhode Island that was on the list of things that Kyra's grant will do, or like the priority, how I would take the actions the Woodland Partnership are proposing to do in our next like strategic phase, and pick the one that's gonna target the problem that we've all identified. And part of it is, I think that many people, the quick answer on what's the priority problem is land conservation. And that's of course the most expensive one. And it's very much, we've talked about this years ago, like land conservation projects tend to be our targets of opportunity. They're rarely follow our carefully crafted strategic, you know, sort of directions. And they're really expensive. So if we take land conservation out of the picture, you know, what activities, what parcels would we go to, you know, like, or describe a project that would fit some of these things. And I'm not asking this to sort of like have somebody tell me, but I'm just trying to like make concrete some of these things that sound great, but then you have to go and do them. So.
Well, I think that's it's a really good, you know, point, David, and, you know, appreciate your, you know, bringing attention to that. I think one thing we're, you know, trying to do in some of the sort of, you know, focal areas, at least that we were, you know, fleshing out on Prudence Island, or suggesting, was to make them realistic or doable. You know, certainly the 2017 to 21 plan, you know, was very ambitious, and you know, looking back, I'm impressed at how much, you know, partners, you know, we're able to do, but certainly that, you know, there are things that we weren't. So wanted to do that. There are some partnerships that, you know, do, you know, work on land conservation and make that a focus of their efforts. They're certainly in the RCT, you know, network. That's something that Rhode Island Woodland Partnership members, you know, haven't, you know, wanted to do as a partnership, but that was a message that we heard pretty loud and clear, and it doesn't have to be that case. But that's why it's not in there right now. I think it's really going to be, you know, individual, you know, partner organizations, and, you know, the, you know, people, you know, representing those organizations who are going to, you know, take a, you know, a leading role in making things happen. If, you know, you have, you know, if we're gonna do more work in the urban forestry sphere, you know, we're gonna need partners who are there to be, you know, regularly participating in meetings. And
that's one of the ones.
Yeah,
that's one. So I mean, of the ones that I came up with, the urban, like figuring out what language to use, what partners make the most sense in the urban forests, if you will. I mean, that to me sounds like something that really needs to be done, and an organization like ours has a special, you know, brings special things to the table on that. The other one that I thought of, which I don't know what the status of this is, but really, what are the obstacles to greater forest products and wood products, you know, in Rhode Island? And because I remember like in RIFCO back in the day, they were talking about like different obstacles to more use of Rhode Island wood products. And there's probably a lot of work to do on that. And that's something that, again, an organization like ours, it's not site focused. So it would be something that we would be able to bring something to. Those are just the two that came to mind.
That's an interesting point. Mark and I just met with the Brown students in regards to the Forest Conservation Commission, and I don't want to like get our groups confused. But a group of students from Brown is very interested in that question itself, wood products, building with wood, the NEF model, thinking through what the challenges are in Rhode Island. And so hopefully that's one of the products we receive from Brown. And I think we'll probably talk about this a little further further down in this meeting, but it does make the most sense for those students to present to the Woodland Partnership because we have more flexibility as to when we can have a meeting based on ethics and meeting rules and regulations. So that may be our December meeting. I know we need to sort of work that out. But yeah, that's on the list of things that they are working on for that commission. Can I add that I think there's an opportunity to look at the work that the Infrastructure Bank approached us on 6-8 a year ago, however long ago that was, when Sydney and Kim Koryath came and presented on figuring out how to use the penny per gallon surcharge in those water supply districts on getting land conservation projects on the ground, and especially in those areas where the suppliers focus on delivery over land protection. I think there's an outreach and education opportunity and an opportunity to leverage funds that we just haven't like sorted. So that could, yes, land conservation as the partnership is one thing, but figuring out how to leverage funding through Infrastructure Bank and through existing programs devoted to water quality is an opportunity.
It's a good problem to have, and to figure out how we're going to work on that, do that. I think as we get feedback on these possible focal areas, those who are signing up to advance them are saying, yeah, my organization will work on that, or I'll work on that, will help determine what we decide to go with. And if there's some maybe good projects that nobody has time to, or it's just not a good fit for their organization to work on, that's will likely be one that drops out. Any other thoughts about the plan? Amanda, not to sort of to put you on the spot too much, but I know you had thoughts about sort of messaging and communication, and how potentially the partnership could do more with that. And I just, if you would wanted to give you space to to speak to that, or we can just continue to talk about it collectively.
So the meeting that I mentioned, that I don't think Kate or David were there, but I was a little bit parroting because, and again, not to conflate the two, but there was a talk about, well, actually it wasn't Forest Conservation Commission. There was talk about, this was with the old growth legislation, and either I think it was David, but somebody said like, we all gotta, and Fern as well, like basically we all gotta get on the same page. We gotta be saying the same things. We gotta be careful about not saying certain things, something to that effect. And it seemed like this would be the most effective forum for having those conversations about, and there are resources for words that work with the public, but addressing the fact that there is just growing distaste for cutting down trees for any reason, and this like disconnect between what is and the way that people understand things to be. And I just think that this is like the venue to have those conversations and then go out into our respective organizations and use that language and maybe to borrow from Kyra, rinse and repeat. If something's not working, come back and talk about how this blew up in my face and maybe we need to rethink it. But I think we need to tackle some of the messaging head on, and it's part of why I asked for the clarifying on advocacy.
Well, thanks for speaking to that, Amanda. I think, you know, this is an important thing, and, you know, hope that, you know, perhaps this is something that, you know, you and others can, you know, can help us work on. But it's a good example of, you know, how it's come up for us.
I think, I don't know if Doug's still on, but this is related, but not the same topic. But when we're talking about urban forests as an extension of, when we're talking about cities as an extension of the forest, urban forest as an extension of forest in general, coming from a wildlife perspective, from a native plant perspective, I become concerned about how that's a different landscape, not from the perspective of number of trees, but from the perspective of the composition of that forest. And so the first thing that came to mind when we were talking about urban forest was we need to bring like, and I know that they, you know, Trees for Us came and did a presentation, but like Groundworks Rhode Island and all those other organizations to the table, and then be talking about where there's overlap and also where there isn't. And messaging there as well. So like that's not even even within like even within DEM, there's not necessarily like an agreed upon this is what we do. So that is a tricky thing to tackle. And I have my own personal biases, but I'll leave it at that.
Well, I don't know what you mean exactly, Amanda, by DEM doesn't have this is what we do. We have a number of, a lot of information on our webpage about urban forestry, and certainly we can discuss some of those things. It is a different type of forest. It has a different type of growing space. There is nothing natural in the urban forest, but it still provides a lot of functionality. So I think, you know, if it's, you know, if you're concerned about it being lumped into a discussion versus having two parallel streams of how each of these forests have different characteristics, but provide, you know, the kinds of services they provide. I think there's plenty of information, and there's plenty of ways we can draw those parallels and still establish the differences between them as far as their function in various aspects.
I can clarify that what I mean is that from a fish and wildlife perspective, we would not want to see any non-native species. We would want to see native species that support native invertebrates, that support native birds and on up. And that forestry, you know, has to concern itself with, is this tree going to survive? And do we have enough different species so that if something attacks, and then if you go out further to Groundworks Rhode Island, they're looking at like, is this palatable to the homeowner? Are we going to get homeowners to agree to plant these things in their backyard? Is it not pretty enough? Is it too tall? Is it, you know, so there's like, there's all, I recognize there's all these other things involved. But my like, is like, we need more native species and less non-native species, because we can study an introduced species as much as we want, but it'll behave until it misbehaves. Like, that's how ecology works, you know. Purple loosestrife behaved for 100 years before it didn't, and that's like you know, that's, again, that's my personal bent, but there are different concerns coming out of different divisions for very valid reasons.
Oh, well, certainly, but we still have to plant trees that are going to survive in the urban environment, and that has been studied extensively by experts as well. So I think it's a matter of being able to recognize where there are aspects that can be, like certainly natural areas, parks, naturalization, those kinds of things, but there are other functions that also have to be met. So it is complicated, but certainly it's something that gets lots of discussion all the time, but we just try to find a way to work that's going to work with all the different stakeholders that are involved and still provide some of the services we do need. So if we're fortunate enough to continue to have forests in Rhode Island, then a lot of that natural functionality and that environment that is required will stay. So if we can manage that and make our cities less prone to flooding and surface flow for stormwater, then I think we'd be doing pretty well for ourselves.
Well, I like the suggestion of sort of try to identify areas where there's good overlap between the ex-urban and rural forest issues and urban ones, and sort of focus more attention there, and perhaps less on issues where there's less overlap.
Yeah, I think when we're looking at the urban interface and the urban intermix, those areas there are particularly valuable. So that's where some of the messaging and things and some of the greatest impact and losses are still being seen. So yeah, I think if there was a way to encourage that, for example, we don't see any hickories being planted in the landscape because of the size of the fruits. I mean, we still get oaks and acorns, but they are much smaller, whereas hickories are fairly large. But once we lose them in the landscape, nobody's replanting them anywhere. And that's something, if you're naturalizing an area, or if you've got the edges of a park or mowing or shooting the fruits from mockernut hickory isn't going to be an issue, then, that's the thing. But it's also getting the nurseries engaged and making those species available. So it's complicated, and Rhode Island isn't the only place that's dealing with these issues. Every state, all the programs have the exact same things, and nobody's solved it yet, because I keep watching, because it's the same with invasive species. Everybody's doing something different. We're not, together at all on the same page, state to state.
I think Doug had unmuted, so I just want to flag Doug if you have something to say. And then I think Mark wanted to say something, just so the folks that are not on camera have the opportunity.
Yeah, I think Christopher had a good point that sort of ex-urban zone in urban areas would be a good place for this group to get involved in, rather than say downtown or in some of the neighborhoods where we have other groups working. But for instance, Providence has 2 conservation districts, Blackstone Park and Newtoconquina Hill. There are other areas that have forested areas like Triggs Golf Course, where we can look at invasive trees. We can look at how to manage them. We can help the local groups. We already are in some ways, manage those areas. It seems to me that would be the natural overlap for this group.
It's a good suggestion, Doug, or thanks for, calling to the attention, that there are, you're mentioning, 2 significant, forests, right in Providence. So it seems that, most of our other municipalities are gonna have them as well. And there's quite a bit we could potentially do there.
Mark.
Hey, yes. Hey, this is Mark. Can you hear me all right? I apologize for my late arrival and the crunching of the leaves under my feet. I don't know what else you can hear as I'm walking around squirting trees. But from Rifco's perspective, I don't think we get too involved in the urban stuff. So I'd like to switch gears a little bit and just just reiterate the whole forest markets and the stewardship of forest land, and the role that both private landowners and the state can have in promoting this. And there are some efforts out there. I know that the Division of Agriculture has a Rhode grown program that we've been trying to connect with and having some difficulty there. Is Fern on the call?
She's not here this afternoon.
Okay. I can follow up with her. But so and then RIFCO has a wood products subcommittee, and we just recently met with the Farm Bureau to talk about the prospect of woods operators getting tax exemptions, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what those Brown University students can put together for us as a promotional educational piece. Kate, it's like herding cats, trying to get them to focus on certain things, because there is so much information out there.
Yeah.
I can imagine how mind-boggling it is for them. So anyway, that's my piece, my 2 cents.
Well, Mark, thanks for speaking to RIFCO's continued interests, and definitely have RIFCO down as sort of tentatively slated to continue working on some of those topics that you just mentioned, and can find out which are the the highest priorities for RIFCO. But appreciate the the continued interest and yours and the organization's work on those fronts.
I apologize for not being available to participate in the strategic planning process. I really wish I could have, but just time crunch this time of year for me.
Sure. Well, thanks for coming in from the field. It's nice to hear the crunch of leaves under your feet out there. That's helping to keep it real for us all here.
Yeah, good. I'm glad I could contribute.
Anybody else have they'd like to add on the strategic plan topic?
If nobody else is going to say anything, I'll go again. Maybe this is a question for Nancy. I wonder whether we should mention something about, sort of providing a mechanism for regular revision of the forest action plan, or are there other kind of functions that that plan was referenced in our discussions already today. It's obviously a plan that people are looking to, and so if we had as a topic for our work, helping to provide input for revisions of, well, the forest action plan or the wildlife action plan or other plans that are coming along. I mean, I know our individual organizations, I'm a little bit divided. Our individual organizations do that as well. But anyway, I just thought maybe there's something we could help with by putting it in.
Well, the state forest action plan is required to be redone every 10 years. So that's being done. And the RIWP was provided with the opportunity. That was just when COVID came through. So the in-person meetings went to, I think, virtual meetings, but were provided with the opportunity to have input into it. We didn't get a whole lot of response. I did work a fair bit with Kate and with Amanda on the initial versions of it, and making sure that things were covered.
I wasn't thinking of it more from that point of view. I was thinking, from the point of view of our strategic plan, writing it in that we help state agencies with their planning or something. I mean,
I think so. I think pointing out that this is a part of your role as partners in the state and ensuring that all elements are addressed and covered, or that, you know, perspectives of the various, I mean, it's such a small state, our perspectives are pretty cozy anyway, but in making sure that as stakeholders, you have the ability to, you know, that you actively pursue engagement and input into these kinds of things, I think is really important. I think our biggest challenge is Rhode Island is because we're so small that everybody's doing like 10 different things. It's really hard when we say, oh, well, let's do something else extra or new, and then we're going to the same pot of people. I told Chris, I think a few weeks ago, just say no. If there's something that you're just going, I just can't add another thing to my plate. So, because I was asking him for something. But yeah, I think that's an important role. That certainly is a significant element of your existence. Why, you know, I'd say part of why you're here. I mean, obviously not from the start, but it has expanded to, you know, this is Rhode Island in a nutshell.
Thanks. I think that's another good point, and that you know, certainly is something that the partnership, or, you know, partnership members do in different combinations. So it's a good suggestion to, you know, call that out in the next plan. Just going to mention, speak to a couple things that are, you know, coming up in the chat here. Scott Rurin, looking forward to seeing how we can consider cross-border projects, as well as, you know, bird-friendly practices, focus of some other New England Audubons. I think that there's, you know, widespread agreement that, you know, trying to continue with the work on forestry for Rhode Island's birds is something that we want to do, and that is something for us. It's important to consider, you know, here in Rhode Island. You know, wanting to look across to the border to our neighbors, and I guess we can talk about how, you know, to fit that within the, you know, the partnership's goals. And I think being able to do that has been critical to being able to land the Southern New England Heritage Forest Partnership money, or the Oak Resiliency LSR grant, for example. So I'm sure there are other collaborations. And Doug still notes province is developing an urban forest master plan, the province tree plan. In it, you know, there should be objectives and strategies on their urban woodlands. Or Doug advocated for that. They're going to need help in writing them, and, you know, this, you know, it involves equity issues, you know, through a different lens, which is a really good point. And I know I was, you know, recently involved with, you know, putting together a forest management plan for Newtoconkinut Park. You know, we've had, you know, Joe Jamroz of the Newtoconkinut Hill Conservancy and other groups, and we could look at, you know, getting, you know, the Blackstone Park Conservancy or the Roger Williams Park Conservancy, for example, you know, participating in these meetings. And as Doug notes, providing some input into that plan. Thanks for that suggestion. All right, well, one last call on strategic planning topics, where we'll turn our attention to space for a policy update. We do have an election, you know, coming up in less than a month. There is a green bond on the ballot. Know that a number of you are more active in day-to-day work on that front than I am, and let's open the floor to that topic.
I can speak to the bond. So it's sort of preaching to the choir. We are asking everyone to vote yes on 3, which is our environmental bond. I assume most of us here do that anyway, but if you guys want a lawn sign, let me know. I've got a bunch in the back of my car. I can share with you to put in front of your home, or and a highly visible place to maybe get some of those people that are not the choir to consider voting yes on 3. Yeah, so vote, I guess. That election's November 8th.
Thanks for the reminder. So just, if we're interested in a sign, we'll reach out to you.
Yeah,
Hey, this is Mark. Can I make a comment about question 3?
sure.
Just some feedback that I've heard from a couple of different people about the inclusion of the $12 million for the Roger Williams Park Zoo project. And some people were like reacting to that, saying, hey, wait a minute, that's a lot of money for a pavilion education center. And how did it get into this bond? We like all the other stuff. So if this bond is tripped up in any way, it's going to be because of that, the inclusion of that project. I don't know if there's anybody on the call who is personally in that process or not, but I'm just saying if it does fail, it might be because of that.
Well, let's hope it does not fail.
Yeah, that's just I'm just passing on comments I've heard on the street, so to speak.
I mean, I don't have any insight on that. All I can say, Mark, the finance committees, both of the House and the Senate, who have had their hearings on the green bond measure and all of the articles of introducing the governor's budget. So this came in at some point through that process. There was, I imagine, advocacy and lobbying done for that inclusion. And hopefully, I think I agree with Kate that this doesn't, hinder typically these green bonds do fairly well. And at least from my perspective, I think overall, Roger Williams Park and Zoo, it's looked at very favorably. So hopefully that will inspire yeses on 3 all around.
I believe there's been a big ticket item, in Providence on the bond in recent years. It's been a bit different from the other things. Most recently, it was dredging the Providence River along the waterfire route. Unfortunately, that did not deter the bond's approval. But yeah, I think we're all on the same page of wanting to see it pass, certainly. But thanks for noting that.
And I will say it's never too early to start advocating for what goes into the next bond in a couple of years. Sooner the better, actually.
Great. Anything else we want to talk about in the policy space? I know, this is more the election season when, ideas, partnerships are formulated rather than the legislative season. But it's good to be talking about it at this stage of the game as well. All right, go, Kate.
I was just going to say in the back, nothing's really been fleshed out until the election, but in the background, there's discussion about revamping the solar siting legislation for another go around this year. So that's something.
All right.
Oh yeah, and I think we can add, based on the public meetings of the Forest Conservation Commission, that we can foresee recommendations coming out of that body to the General Assembly for what the Forest Conservation Commission is tasked with. And I imagine that the Land Use Commission would also have some action items for the General Assembly to consider.
And for those who need a refresher, there is a commission to study all land use in the House right now. And there are members from Audubon, Larry's on it, Save the Bay. There's a few city and town planners. The real estate and builders associations are on there, right, Priscilla? So it's like studying all manner of land use, which is complex.
So there's been sort of talk or speculation about the old growth bill being reintroduced again this year. Is it any more information on that this time?
I mean, I think that we all know that on the consent calendar on the Senate side, the old growth committee was called, like, legislation went through the consent calendar saying that there should be an old growth study commission. I haven't heard anything else about that, nor have I seen any new legislation. I know that it's been talked about, but by the Forest Conservation Commission. But
yeah, I mean, I talked to the advocate for the last one bills and he is not satisfied. So I would expect additional legislation to be proposed.
All right.
How's that?
Thanks. Good. All right. Well, let's move into the partner update section of the meeting. And if you have an update, why don't you can just raise a hand, speak up in turn, put something in the chat, and we go from there. Kate, I saw your hand go right up there.
yeah, so this is for me and Nancy. After 2 long years, we finally have agreements in place to roll out the RCPP. What? So we are in the process of reminding everybody like what they said that they would work on 2 years ago. And it's likely that our first meeting of the technical / steering committee will be at the end of November. I'm working on planning that now with NRCS and Nancy and partners who are on this call who have committed match or agreed to be lead partners or secondary partners, whatever we're calling ourselves. Expect that I will be sending you your formal commitment letters with all the things you promised you would do, as well as an overview on what this project actually is and some slides from NRCS over the next couple of weeks so we can be ready to go and just spend all of that easement money on good projects quickly.
Thanks, Kate. Yeah, no, it's good to see that coming together, and expect be a lot of Woodland partnership faces at that meeting when it happens.
Oh, and I just want to come back to the fact that this would be a good space for those Brown students to give us their presentations. So if anyone doesn't have any objections, I'd like to talk about that for whatever December week that they have scheduled for those presentations.
That sounds like a great focal topic for the December meeting. Updates from anyone else?
Sure, I'll just speak to what I added in the chat. Audubon is celebrating 125 years, but also in addition to that, Larry Taff is retiring after 17 years of leading Audubon as an executive director. So we'll do a nice formal recognition for him at that annual meeting. It's at our Nature Center in Bristol at 2 p.m. We're also going to honor volunteers and the Speaker of the House, Joe Chikarchi, as well. Yeah, so if you are looking for something to do on a Sunday afternoon, join us. It's free and open to the public.
And what Sunday afternoon?
It is October 23rd, this Sunday afternoon at 2 p.m. at the Nature Center and Aquarium in Bristol. And I just dropped Paul a link in the chat with the RSVP link, but don't stress too much about RSVP. You can just walk it too.
I'm just surprised I hadn't gotten it through Audubon.
Yeah, we've sent a few emails. So sorry.
No problem.
Didn't see that sooner. You're welcome.
Great. If you're looking for a full weekend of forest and conservation related activities, Mark's noted that the Rhode Island Tree Farm tour is going to be this Saturday at the Hope Associates property out in Situate or Hope, 9:30 on Saturday morning. That's a good destination for a walk to get your weekend started. And Lana is just thrown in here that the Forest Ecosystem Monitoring Cooperative is looking for abstracts for their upcoming winter conference, which is in December, and the themes the role of innovation and technology in stewardship and engagement in forest science. So that's something for some of us to consider participating in. Thanks, Alana. The other updates.
Yeah, yes, we're having a social this afternoon, 4:30 at Tilted Barn, dealing with the induction of Peter Stetson in the Enviathon Hall of Fame. We are also working on women owning woodlots in January. We're looking for speakers to help us on insect and disease in forest pests. And we had a very successful COVID program last Saturday with 25 participants. So it worked out very nicely.
It's really nice to return to the coverts of the in-person format for the first time in quite a while.
If I can interject, Paul, you're looking for speakers to speak about insects and diseases?
Yes, and I was asked to contact you, so I will.
Awesome.
Right, we got the Conservation Awards dinner coming up on November 18th.
Is that a Friday, Mark?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
I think it's going to be at the West Greenwich Elks Club, if I recall correctly, but that's a convocation of conservationists and landowners. So that on your calendars. And sort of speaking of other or just sort of social events, or just as all of Chris Modisette is retiring from NRCS officially October 31st, I believe. They're starting to set forth the process of hiring a new state resource conservationist. But since he's not here, I'll mention that there's going to be a gathering for Chris, just a social gathering on the evening, or rather the late afternoon of Tuesday, October 25th, from 4 to 6 p.m. at Back 40 in North Kingstown, just sort of a restaurant and pub right near the Tilted Barn there. They couldn't have us since they're closed on Tuesdays, but we're gonna recognize for Chris right across the street.
Now, also, they have one Wednesday, the 26th at NRCS's headquarters at noon. So if you can't make one, you can make the other. Either or, contact Walter Marshall or Cameron on these if you're interested, because they need number counts.
Can someone email us all that information? I would certainly like to at least get to one.
Sure. I think the one at the Back 40 is more of their local resource group, but I think the one on the 26th is open to all. But yes, I'll forward information.
Yeah, certainly don't think you'll be turned away at either one.
No, we don't want your money.
And just while we're talking about events, mentioned so that the Regional Conservation Partnerships Network, they're having another virtual gathering this year. It's going to be on Thursday, November 17th. Last year really focused on the why side of advancing climate justice and resilience. This year, it's going to focus on the how to do that. And that's something that we've, been talking about doing. So I'm looking forward to participating for at least part of the day, and I'll throw the link in here. Any other announcements or updates? One I thought I would bring up, since typically we meet on the third, Thursday, which unfortunately that does conflict with the RCP network gathering, which is on that date's November 17th next month. So wanted to propose an alternate time for the Woodland Partnership meeting. Don't know, how would the following Tuesday afternoon, that's the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, how would that look for people? Fair enough. Okay. And if there are, no sort of other proposals, I know that Fern Graves and DEM have been involved with trying to bring a program called Dirt to Trees to Wildlife to Rhode Island, and there may be the possibility of getting a presentation on that from the folks who are behind it up in New Hampshire. So that's what I think I'll look into. Yes, Kate.
There's just a meeting for the EC4 Science and Technical Committee. Meeting is on that Tuesday from 1:30 to 2:30. So just flagging that. I don't know if that's a conflict with anyone, but.
All right, well, we'll hold on to that for a moment. I know that ultimately that is a group that we'd like to engage with a bit. But I'll, hearing sort of no objections, we'll kind of hold that date for a short time and then likely go with it unless it's a significant conflict.
Christopher?
Yes.
Mark, if we're meeting early December to accommodate students at Brown University for their presentation, perhaps do we need a November meeting if we're going to be immediately following up in early December?
That's a fair point. Would it be early December when the Brown students would want to present, Kate?
Kate knows more about that.
I gotta find one of the 17 pieces of paper in front of me that has when they're. It's early December at some point. I just am not certain when.
So to be determined.
All right. Well, thanks for bringing that up, though. But it's a good point that we wouldn't need to have 2 meetings within the space of 2 weeks, probably. So we will let you know about that through the Woodland Partnership list, and keep your eyes out for a Google form survey, coming sometime hopefully in the earlier part of November. Well, thanks everybody for participating in a very full meeting today. Good to see everyone back on the Zoom. See you in person in the summer, and hope you have a good afternoon. We'll see you next time.
Awesome. Thank you. Take care.